Stay tuned after the episode to hear our latest edition of And Then What. For 18 years, the Diaries has been in the business of getting you out there, doing what you love with the people you love, pushing you to maybe see a different way or a different path through life, and realizing that others have done this before. We know when we tell stories about people doing hard things, chasing dreams, working for their communities, and being curious, it begets more of that. It's infectious. Good things can happen. Right now, we're doing that with the show. We need you to keep this project going. That's the reality of the modern internet. To keep inspiration alive and the thoughtful stories and the laughter going. Some of you have come forward and stepped up and joined the Diaries Plus, but we need more of you. We need a bigger community saying this kind of project matters in this world. Diaries Plus is the tool that we make that happen with. So please consider becoming a member of Diaries Plus. There's a link in the show notes. You become a part of something. You become part of the inspiration, part of the creativity and the community, and we thank you for that. And I think we can build the show into the powerful thing it's been and the powerful thing it's going to become together. The link is in the show notes or on our website, dirtbagdiaries.com. Here's to more Type 2 fun. Here's to being part of something positive.
On a sweltering spring afternoon in May, I walked across a stage that looked like a grown-up erector set, temporarily constructed to take over the entirety of the Waterman Green at the University of Vermont. I was handed a notebook-sized black booklet in front of thousands of people, containing a degree that supposedly signified the greatest accomplishment of my life to date. When the crowd clapped and my family smiled brightly in the front row, I conceptually understood that my college graduation was a cause for celebration. But to me, the papers threatening to slide out from between the desperate grip of my two sweaty hands felt more like a death sentence. I was a student, an athlete, a tutor, a teammate, a roommate, and a friend to 7 spirited, adventurous, and outdoorsy women. But with that diploma in my hands, who would I be now? Just a week after my stage walk, I carried the last box of my belongings down the 3 flights of stairs and out of the apartment I had lived in for the last 2 years. My roommates had already dispersed, some going to live at home and some moving elsewhere to start careers or continue with their schooling. We all made our promises to keep in touch. As the last to leave, I walked our landlady around the empty rooms that once bustled with life and energy. Turning off of our dead-end street for the last time, car packed to the brim and emotions running wild, I furiously wiped at the tears falling down my cheeks. The 30-minute drive to the house I would be moving into with my partner, Hayden, felt excruciatingly long. Nestled in a small town amidst the green mountains of Vermont, the house had incredible access to some of the greatest outdoor recreation on the East Coast. We made big plans to gravel bike, trail run, and explore the surrounding mountains in the coming months. I pulled into the driveway, and despite the obvious opportunities sprawling out all around me, could only feel grief. It felt ridiculous. I tried to use what I knew best as my medicine: movement in the great outdoors. I ran obsessively, even completing my first half marathon. I biked obsessively too, mapping out all the new roads and trail systems in my limited free time outside of my now full-time work. I was trying to literally outrun, or sometimes even outbike, my struggles, never once slowing down to take a deep breath. But in those first summer months, It felt like I had goggles strapped tight to my face. It felt like I couldn't get them off, and I couldn't stop them from altering my perception of the very real beauty that I knew surrounded me every day. I would get this sensation often while out riding my bike, something I had always loved to do, and would believe for a moment that there was actually less sunlight, or less color, or simply less joy in the world around me. I would take off my riding glasses, which bothered me in an indescribable way at the time, and squint and try to look closer. I thought maybe there was a tangible change to the external world that could account for the way I felt I was misunderstanding my own life. I made plans with Hayden one day in late June to do a big ride up one of the famous mountain climbs in the area, the Appalachian Gap, 50 miles, straight to the point. We would ride to the mountains, send the gap straight to the top, then turn around and cruise down, plodding along home with whatever energy was left after the effort. We set out in the afternoon, each gearing up with extra bottles of water and electrolyte packets to account for the sweat we were bound to exude on the hot summer day. A relatively flat, low-trafficked dirt road along the Winooski River led us out most of the way. The rest of the ride, and the climb itself, would be on pavement. We rode at conversation pace, fueling as we went. I tried hard to take in the way the sunlight shimmered through the trees, how their leaves, extra green from a particularly wet summer, waved to me as I rode by. I watched the water, glistening as it rushed along to my right for miles on end. I glanced over to the Huntington Gorge as we passed. My mind replayed memories of the days I spent lounging on the upper bank with friends, or jumping into the warm pools of natural water down below. But even this water, reflecting the vibrant rays of light, no longer beckoned to me. Frustrated, I tried to act normal. I sped on, begging myself to wake up already, to appreciate the damn world again. I had ridden up App Gap twice prior, but never continuously. It was important to me now to feel as if I had done something new, something hard. After all, I was looking to turn a physical triumph into mental fortitude. At the base of the climb, Hayden and I agreed to divide and conquer. He, a much faster climber than me, would ride to the top and turn to go home in time to pick up his car from the shop before they closed. And I, in my bad mood, would be able to brood as I pleased, thank goodness. Priorities, right? We waved goodbye as I choked down an extra packet of goo for good luck. I set out at a miserably slow clip, but set in my mission not to stop. The pitch increased as I climbed up and around the switchbacks, 4, 5, 6%. I pushed hard on my pedals, fighting to lose myself in the repetitive cyclical motion. I turned another corner and the slope jumped up again, 7, 8, 9%. I struggled to tame my ragged breathing. At a brief plateau, I glanced around. The view was increasingly vast and stunning. I was waiting for the moment I believed was coming. The moment when my vision would snap back to normal. When the effort would bring me back to myself. Finally, at the last mile, the incline shot up to nearly 20%. Having already finished the climb, Hayden flew by me and waved on his descent toward home. I mustered an almost smile, which I imagine looked more like a grimace. Faster and harder, I shoved my feet down, around and around, breathing now completely out of control, still determined not to step off of my bike. Small notes painted on the pavement from the annual Green Mountain stage race marked the distance left to the top of the climb. My vision blurred as I noted a marker announcing I was just 200 meters from the summit. I stood up on my pedals with shaky legs to finish the climb and literally cried, feeling self-conscious as I was sure the passenger cars driving by me would judge. I crested the top of the Appalachian Gap, pulled off into the parking lot next to the barrier decorated with thousands of stickers from adventurers around the world, and set my feet on the ground. My arms splayed out on top of my handlebars, and my head rested on top of my arms. A thick stream of spit oozed from the side of my open mouth. Once I regained sufficient composure, I looked up. I saw rows of mountains stretching for miles around, and the winding of the gap road leading back down to where I came from. I saw trees swaying with the wind, glowing brighter still in the intense afternoon sunlight. I had done it. I had ridden the gap without stopping. But where was my sense of accomplishment? That culminating moment where my world shifted back into place? I still felt the need to rush, to tear ass home and collapse in a useless lump on the couch in exhaustion. It was then, at the top, that I gave up. And I mean really gave up. I felt I had tried it all. I had done the hard thing, and still didn't feel any better. So I saddled back on my bike, defeated, muscles aching to the bone, and started to ride down the mountain. Always a cautious descender, I rode my brakes nearly the whole way, keeping my pace as slow as possible given the steep grades. With a particularly hard right corner approaching, I quickly flicked my head to glance behind me and check for cars. All clear. I pulled left slightly further into the road to give myself ample space for a wide turn. That was when a piece of glass, or maybe it was metal, or perhaps some kind of sharp plastic, pierced the sidewall of my tire, popping it immediately, sending me skidding sideways across the road into oncoming traffic. Things did not, at least for me, move in slow motion like the movies suggest. My right leg scratched along the pavement, trapped under the bike, which was very suddenly horizontal to the ground. The car ascending the mountain swerved into the other lane where, as I knew from when I checked over my shoulder, there were fortunately no other cars. I had all but teleported to the barrier guarding the opposite side of the road. Stunned, I simply stood up and assessed the damage to my bike, which was, luckily, minimal, aside, of course, from the flat tire itself. I then assessed my own damage, which was also, luckily, impossibly minimal. The driver who swerved around me was already continuing their journey up, oblivious to the shock they had just caused me. I took out my phone to call Hayden for a ride home. The only problem? No cell service. Now, if you're thinking, this would be a great time to panic, you would be correct. But you have to remember, I was depressed. I just had my final, soul-crushing, Hail Mary moment at the top of a brutal mountain climb, and I then proceeded to crash, hard, on the ride down. So actually, I had no energy left to panic with. I did the only thing that felt natural to me, and started to walk down the mountain. As I got going, I took my helmet, still sweat-soaked from the climb, and hung it onto my handlebars. Maybe a mile after that, I decided my cycling shoes were uncomfortable to walk in, and took them off too. I looked around for houses to knock on doors, but saw none. A bit further down the mountain, subconsciously really, I started to hum. I used to hum around my apartment, when I did schoolwork, or on my walks to practice in the morning, but it had been a while since I last buzzed with a tune. Here I was, walking down this mountain, cursing my bike, and the climb, and the litter in the road, and anything else I deemed responsible, all while humming. Then, I started to laugh to myself. I checked my phone for service again, still none. So I kept walking down, my calves now burning like I lit them on fire, my stomach rumbling with hunger. I checked my watch to see how long I had been walking. It read 4 miles. I was almost back at the base of the climb. The sun was starting to set now, its light softening. I took off my riding glasses to see the changing light more clearly. I rested the glasses atop my shoes in my helmet-turned purse. Sometimes cars would drive by me, but none would stop. I passed the first house, but was scared off from knocking by a frightening-sounding dog running free in the yard. So I kept walking, watching as harsh oranges gave way to light pinks and yellows in the sky. At some point later on, I passed an apple tree and plucked an unripe crabapple to chew on. I laughed again to myself at the absurdity of my situation. Several hours later, and about 6 miles down the road from the site of my crash, I saw another house with a woman standing outside unloading groceries from her trunk. I called out and asked to use her phone. Wary of me, but I assume shocked into action by my clearly distressing visual appearance, she brought me inside. I called Hayden, who immediately set out to pick me up, and thanked the kind woman for her help. She offered to let me stay in her home and wait for my ride to arrive, but having walked so far already and felt so calm for the first time in so long, I thanked her again, went back outside, and chose to continue on my way. Not so long after, Hayden did find me, walking down the side of the road at sunset, in my socks, with my helmet hanging from my handlebars holding all of my belongings, humming to myself. I cannot claim that my wipeout magically resolved my post-graduation identity crisis. I still don't really know who I am now, and I'm starting to think that uncertainty might stick around for a while longer. But I can say that when faced with the simplest of choices, I opted to keep walking, and that sometimes just moving forward is enough. My name is Carolyn Doyle, and this is my short.
After a short break, we hear an essay from Ben Burke. The Diaries is supported by Oboz Footwear. Oboz, outside of Bozeman. That's what it means, right? And the company uses the Montana mountains like a giant R&D lab. So whether you're looking for a classic low-profile shoe or a rugged off-trail hiker, Oboz has figured it out by testing it in this rugged landscape. The Bridger Peak is their pinnacle product, engineered for hikers seeking the highest level of protection and stability. The all-leather uppers feature Vibram and Gore-Tex technology for the toughest trails. Or maybe the highlight is more your style, designed for those who seek a lower-profile hiker with all-terrain performance and aim to be on their feet from dusk till dawn. That's kind of my style. The highlight has a unique blend of recycled and bio-based materials and a range of color options. To find your next pair of footwear, check out obozfootwear.com/lovehiking. Oboz Footwear. Love hiking. The other day, I realized, I'm kind of tired. And I realized I had been doing something, like whether it was a big mountain bike ride, running, climbing, lifting, for like 10 days straight. On those days, when I'm asking a little bit more of my body, I've been keeping myself fueled with Kachava. Kachava's whole body meal shakes keep your body and mind nourished all day. With 2 scoops of Kachava, you get 85 superfoods, nutrients, and plant-based ingredients. It's all there right on the back of the package. You can see what you get, and it's just an awesome add into what I eat during the day. So not only am I getting 25 grams of plant-based protein, I'm also getting adaptogens and super greens at the same time. Added bonus, no artificial flavors, colors, or sweeteners. Kachava now has 6 flavors to choose from, including the new strawberry. It's delicious, and it's definitely the favorite in our house right now. You've never tasted strawberry like this. Go to kachava.com and use code DIARIES for 15% off your order. That's Kachava, KACHAVA.com, code DIARIES for 15% off. Support for the Diaries comes from Terns. Terns After Sun skincare products are formulated to support skin recovery from sun and environmental exposure, things like pollution, wind, cold, and more. While sunscreen helps prevent UV damage, the Terns products support skin health. They're powered by a complex made from marine ingredients that work to rebalance inflammatory pathways. And that's a bunch of science that I don't totally understand, but I gotta say, it's a simple habit that's started to make my skin feel better, especially this summer. I've been outdoors a ton. May Day is my go-to when I get more sun than expected. It minimizes peeling and replenishes moisture, which means my skin feels better, quicker, and turns everyday lotion, well, I use it every single day. My skin, it just loves it, drinks it up. Seriously, I never thought I'd be doing skincare, but I am on board after Turns. After Sun should not be an afterthought. Use the code DIRTBAG to get 25% off your first order at turns.com. We'll put a link in the show notes, and you can try Turns for yourself.
Late summer is an absolutely perfect time to be in Maine. I found myself there in the place I'd been spending most of my days lately, at my family's camp on the shores of Flying Pond, sulking on the chaise lounge under the rafters of the screen porch. I watched the days go by from this spot, usually with only the sound of the LL Bean triangle wind chime to break my ruminating over the heartbreak I was feeling. That and my dad occasionally coming to the porch to try and rouse me from my miserable state. I had just experienced the end of an 8-year relationship that started in college. I turned 30 a few months back and was scared of the prospect of starting my life over. I felt completely lost, so I returned from my home in Oregon to this little pond in the Belgrade Lakes chain in central Maine in search of solitude, healing, and some epic sunset photos during nightly boat rides. My parents bought this camp prior to the 1986 season when I was 4 years old. Once the ice began its annual retreat from the lake surface, our weekend visits began, teasing the summer adventures to follow. My mom was a school teacher, which meant that for 5 weeks every summer, this was home. I learned my love of the outdoors, wandering the densely forested woods around our camp and exploring every nook and cranny of the parrot-shaped lake. Then, in what felt like an instant, spring, summer, and autumn sped by, and it was time to close camp for the winter, before the lake was reclaimed once more by its blanket of ice. To this day, that little patch of land is connected to my soul. Seeing as I was making a rare visit home from my life in the Pacific Northwest, my dad had joined for the trip to spend time together. And the last thing I wanted was to be around other people, least of all my dad. I was annoyed by his presence and his efforts at understanding the intense emotional pain I was feeling. I wanted to sit in my shit and be miserable, alone. At 30, I didn't yet have the peer-like relationship with my dad that I did when I exited my 30s. I was stuck between the rebellion of youth and whatever true adult life was supposed to feel like. And I was also mad at myself for being annoyed that my dad was merely trying to understand what I was going through in the way that he could. He just wanted to spend time with one of his sons in the place he'd worked so hard to make a reality almost 30 years prior. Photography was a hobby that my dad enjoyed for decades before I even came along. His enthusiasm for the next great piece of gear far outpaced his interest in the technical side of, how to actually make a good photo. There isn't a moment on earth that he couldn't capture with a blurry frame. Having pulled myself off the screen porch and back into the special world around me, I was on our dock setting up my camera on the tripod I'd just added to my photo arsenal. My dad came down the route-lined path to our dock to see what I was fussing over. I wanted to capture the giant bowl in the middle of Flying Pond while the light was good. The bowl was the deepest part of the lake, and really the only place on the lake you could rip around if you were tubing or jet skiing, so it was always a hub of activity. At about 3.5 miles long, Flying Pond has plenty of space, but it's still on the small side as far as Maine lakes go. When you look out beyond that bowl of high-speed fun, you'll see the rolling green hills of Mount Vernon and Vienna rising behind the lake, and there's a clearing. Toward the left side of the camera, you see it. It's a big meadow in the middle of a dense green New England forest. Anyone who's ever had the pleasure of spending a day on that dock on Flying Pond has noticed the clearing and wondered how it got there. I don't remember if it was my dad or me who remarked on the clearing, but I do remember turning to him and saying, "Why don't we drive up there and see if we can find it? It would be cool to take a photo of the camp in reverse." A smile came across my dad's face as he said, "Let's do it." His life was one of responsibility for others from a young age, but he still had that streak of rebelliousness within him. And hey, at the very least, we'd have a story of getting chased off someone's land and speeding back to the more legal confines of the Burke camp on Vienna Shores Road. We grabbed our camera gear and piled into the Jeep to head for the closest turnoff we thought might get us to the clearing. Leaving the pavement of Route 41, the tires began crunching over the rutted-out dirt road. We began to climb as we crisscrossed a series of barely marked roads until we pulled up next to a large open meadow halfway up this main mountain. This had to be it. We left our gear in the Jeep and scouted the spot to see if we were in the right place. It was beautiful. Clumps of low-lying brush and the telltale boulders of an old Maine field that still had the scouring marks of the last ice age on them. Looking to the south beyond the clearing was a stunning view of not only Flying Pond, but many other members of the Belgrade Lakes chain. We found our spot. We quickly returned to the Jeep and grabbed our camera gear. There wasn't a soul around, and we hoped it would remain that way, or that we'd at least come across a friendly property owner in the middle of our escapade. Besides, my dad could talk his way out of anything. He was a lawyer by trade. We set up our tripods. My dad gazed through his camera's viewfinder, his hat backwards and a big smile on his face as we tried to zero in on our camp from high above. We were having fun together, not just as father and son, but now as two adults doing something we both loved. His exhilaration was the only thing that broke me from underneath my cloud of misery. We drove back to the camp, hooting and hollering about actually finding the clearing and not getting caught doing it. We had exactly the kind of experience that inspired my dad and mom to have a family camp in the first place. After a few days, he departed back to Connecticut and I remained at the camp. Part of me never wanted to leave, to just move back east and live right here. My final few evenings I spent pursuing sunset photos during twilight boat rides in our little 13-foot Boston whaler. Still sad, but also thinking back to that day we found the clearing. Eventually, I said my goodbyes to my parents in Connecticut and returned home to Oregon to figure out how to rebuild my life. At that moment, I thought there would be endless future days on Flying Pond. Little did I know that within 3.5 years of those late summer days spent healing at the lake, my parents would sell our family camp to help fund their retirement. A few years later, my dad would develop dementia. I said goodbye to our family camp on a cold and clear day in December 2015, and we said goodbye to my dad in the waning days of January 2024. My oldest brother and I returned in October 2024 in his boat, and we spread some dirt and leaves from our dad's grave in the water just offshore from our old family camp. And when we turned the boat around for the day use launch, the first place my eyes went to was the clearing off in the distance. Like so many things in life, if I knew how this story would end back in 2012, I would have enjoyed my dad's company so much more during those few late summer days in the Maine woods. But I do have the memories of our last great adventure together. Oh, and his photos that day? Somehow crystal clear. My name is Ben Burke, and this is my short.
Thank you to Carol and Ben for writing your essays and sharing them with us. We appreciate it. Our stories come from friends of friends, and from you, our community. If you have a compelling idea for a guest or a story lead, please give us a shout. You can email us at editor@ducktapethandbeer.com. Thanks to the folks who have recently become Diaries Plus members, And to those that continue to support the show, you're making sure the Diaries is here for everyone. If you would like to join and become a part of what we're doing together, you can find a link in the show notes or look on our website, dirtbagdiaries.com. Want another way to help? Write us a review on Apple Podcasts. Seriously, it helps others find the show. Music today from Drexler, Fields of Ethera, Otros Alabasi, Tahif Atiak, Dreaming of Stars, David Swenson, and Brendan O'Connell. The tracks are courtesy of the artists or Track Club. Jacob Bain and Nis Koto composed our theme song. You can find the artists at our website, dirtbagdiaries.com. This episode was produced by Becca Cahal and Skylar Perwins. Becca Cahal is our executive producer. I'm Fitz Cahal, and you've been listening to the Dirtbag Diaries. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to And Then What, the segment where we break down the headlines and figure out what the hell's happened since then.
National parks. Last February, after sweeping firings, freezing of hiring of seasonal workers, and fork-in-the-road emails, there was an outpouring of bipartisan support for our national parks and the employees. Yet the workforce has still been reduced by about a quarter, despite already being stretched thin. And strong visitation? It continues. What's happened to our national parks after a summer season? How are they faring? Today, Fitz is joined by David Lamfrom, Vice President of Regional Programs at the National Parks Conservation Association.
David, would you just introduce us and can you kind of give the brief introduction to the organization?
My name is David Lamfrom. I work for the National Parks Conservation Association. The National Parks Conservation Association is an organization that's over 100 years old that works to protect our national parks, and that was actually founded based on that very principle that national parks cannot be protected from within the government, and that there needs to be an outside voice to help support and protect those parks. And I believe that this moment is very much proving that to be exactly the case. It's really incredible to think about the fact that the United States has the first, oldest, and most professional national park service on the earth. And that over that time, we've learned what it takes to really build an incredible national park system. And there's been so much effort to undermine and dismantle that national park system in this administration. And that's stuff that we're working on, and that we're trying to make sure the public has a deep awareness of, because it's very easy to go visit a park, to be grateful that you have the park, but not to necessarily think about what's required in order to make sure that we retain this.
Yeah, it's interesting because something like national parks, if you were to go do polling around them, you would find that the vast majority of Americans would agree that the parks are important. They're something we should support. With something that so sort of enjoys bipartisan support, why is the administration why did they go after the national park system?
It's a great question. And I think that there has been a goal to generally dismantle the federal government. And the national park system happens to be a part of that. And so you're seeing reductions across all of these different agencies, across the federal government, that goal of efficiency. But I think that what we are continuing to hear from people is that when we talk about these impacts that the national parks are facing, people are saying, hey, wait, I didn't sign up for this. This is not what I believe in. This is not what I want. These places bring incredible joy. There's so many human beings who've made these investments, and they've made these investments to create these businesses in the shadows of national parks because of the belief that these places would persist. So there's a business community aspect to it, and there's also this community aspect, which I think is really beautiful. And it's part of a system that now tells of the American experience in every different dimension. There is no national park system in the world that does that in the way that we do. And it's worth protecting. And so disconnection between what the people want and the actions decision makers are taking, and the way the administration is viewing these incredible resources that they're overseeing.
So often in this current state of our world, we have this moment where we get a big headline and there's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of think pieces show up for 1 week. We get this boost of it. And then oftentimes it sort of fades into the background. But like really since those massive Valentine's Day firings and then the sort of reduction in force that have gone down, have the worst case scenarios played out? Because I think there was a lot of concern that there would be overcrowding, that there would be the parks were a mess. How is it actually played out, especially now that we're through 2/3 of the summer?
There's a couple of pieces. First thing I want to say is when you think about the National Park Service employees, in many cases, like these NPS employees, they live in incredibly remote places. The federal government provides not just their job, but also their housing, right? So the folks who work for the Park Service, they really, really want to. They really, really believe in it, and they're making these choices that they might only in the most remote places they might only get groceries monthly, right? Their kids might have to go 2 hours to school every day. Like they're making big life choices because they really, really believe in this mission. And I don't ever want folks to forget that Park Service employees are the epitome of public servants. They believe that we should have parks and they want the public to be able to really come to these places and have these transformational experiences. At the beginning of this administration, you felt like you were the most respected public servant. And then to just get beat down and beat down and beat down is really difficult. And, a lot of stuff happened, like permanent staff kept getting fired. I think we've lost something like 24% total. There was a delay in the hiring of seasonal, so there aren't enough humans to do the jobs that need to be done. And it's important to say it's not just that, it's that these are already folks who are doing 2 or 3 jobs before. And for many of these seasonals, they're going to leave at the end of the season. To speak directly to the question, we have seen on the ground a lot of impacts, and we've been really involved in trying to create a lot of pressure. So there were national seashores where there were issues with there not being enough lifeguards. There are many parks where we're hearing off the record reports from employees that visitor centers aren't open for the proper amount of hours, or that you don't have somebody collecting at pay stations, or that you have certain staff pulling double duty. It is always the case that it is like the iceberg where you can see the top of the iceberg, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's happening with all the science staff? What's happening with the wildlife biologists? What's happening with the folks who do cultural resources? What about the folks who are doing the tribal consultation, right? Because the parks have been ordered to stay open, that all the energy and resources are going to just basically like holding a public face.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a facade. It's Wizard of Oz, right? And right behind the curtain is the fact that you have staff who are beleaguered and they're just doing everything they can to hold it together because they really love and believe in what they're doing. So I always want to give Park Service all the credit, but I also just want to say that the Park Service has not been put in a position where they can honor their basic obligations. And this isn't what the American people want.
It almost makes you wonder that next year may be even harder because a lot of these people aren't going to opt into going through the same painful process one more time. How much of there is a concern for next year and the years afterwards? You make it through this year, you pull off the facade, but what starts to happen?
I think the term I would use is erosive. People are exhausted and they're showing up in really good ways still because they care. But how long can people realistically do that? Especially when you're not being treated with respect and dignity. And there's like, why weren't people getting hired? There's so many reasons, but one of the reasons is if you don't have the basic staff to be able to do that hiring, you're gonna have trouble hiring. Let's take search and rescue, for example. At most parks, the search and rescue team, there's not a dedicated paid search and rescue team necessarily. It's volunteers from across the Park Service and other volunteers. So if you're out in the field and something goes down, the person who saves your life, it might be that person in HR.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's a lot to think about as you think about all of those components, how they all fit together and what the impacts of those things are.
Have there been any more anecdotes of just like, oh man, this really is being held together by wire and duct tape? And
so like it's really easy to say, okay, so the visitor center was, had shorter hours. But then when you think about what that actually means, right? People spent all of this time, energy, money. They were hoping to get some advice about how to experience this place. They were looking for some guiding, right? They were looking for some support. That didn't happen. And also, like, did they have the chance that, to actually connect in with a ranger or not? Also, just somebody not taking your fee payment. Like, you don't know what trails are open. You don't know what roads are open. You might not even be getting a park map at that point, right? It sounds like small things, but it's really not. It's fundamental to your ability to really have the type of experience that we hope people have.
One of the things we always like to do on this segment of the show is say, like, what can people do to help? But in this case, like, is there something that an everyday person can do to help sort of stop this erosion, or to help support these federal employees that are there, these public servants that are working so hard? What can people do?
One thing that we're really, really recommending that people do is we're asking them to talk to their members of Congress. I think people feel a lot of barriers around that. Firstly, people may feel like it's hopeless, or they may feel like their congressperson already agrees with them. Either way, the question that it stands up in my mind is, where you at on these issues? If you care about these places and you believe in these places, and especially if you live in a community that benefits from these places, where are you at? Right? If you're seeing this agency that matters so much to everybody being beleaguered, where are you at? And I think that that's a reasonable thing to ask. And when we talk to members of Congress, they love and care about these places too. And I think that part of what they need is, like, sometimes you have to help people do what they want to do. And there's a lot of members of Congress who might want to be a little bit more forward on these issues, and they need their constituents to ask them to be champions. And so that's a great thing to ask. Hey, we want you to be a champion. We want you to be vocal in public. When you have time on the floor, talk about national parks, talk about our communities, talk about what it means to our communities, talk about the jobs that are created in our communities. There's so much people can do. In addition to asking them to be champions, they should also say the National Park Service should not move forward with a reduction in force. What we need to do is to unfreeze hiring, right? We need to make sure that we actually get butts in seats so people can do the good work of protecting these incredible places that we all love.
Well, David, I really appreciate you taking the time today and sitting down and chatting with us and kind of sharing what you guys have been seeing over at the NPCA.
Thank you for everything you do. If I can ever be helpful or supportive, holler at me, and I'll let you know next time I'm in Seattle too.
Thanks for taking the time.
All right, man. Peace.
Posting these pieces on our website, dirtbagdiaries.com, in case you want to share. And then what? Thanks to Diaries Plus members for making this reporting possible. Links are on our website and in the recent show notes. Thank you for caring about public lands.